Welcome to the Expo Show. I'm your host, Greg Merriweather. Today I've got a special guest. He's a guy I've been trying to talk to. He's arrived, he's here, and that is Attorney General Curtis Hill. Glad to have you today.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, man. It's a pleasure to have you here. There's, it's just like a lot of folklore. I don't know if it's true, but we're gonna find out. You know, you're a legend.
We'll see.
But no, I'm happy to have you here, man, because I think it's necessary for the community to know as many people as I can help introduce them to. I know that people hear your name, but you know, when we think about an attorney general, a lot of times it's like, most people don't know.
Sure.
So I just want to really, you know, allow you to have some time with me and then share with the community what it is that you do, who you are, and you know, hash some stuff out.
Thank you. I think that's great.
Absolutely. So let me ask you first, man, you know, Attorney General. When we think about the Attorney General, what is it, what's the job, what does it entail?
Well, the standard answer would be that it's the lawyer for the state, the chief lawyer for the state of Indiana. So we handle legal actions that are on behalf of the state. We handle defense of the state. We handle criminal appeals for the prosecuting attorneys across the state. We do consumer protection complaints. So if you have situations where there's a natural disaster and people coming into a community to take advantage of people, and you have a complaint on some problematic vendors, those complaints come to us and we do investigation and do our best to hold people accountable. We handle the privacy issues with the phone and identity theft issues, things of that nature. So it's a wide variety of actual statutory functions. But beyond that, it's also, in my view, a leadership position. It's an opportunity to have a bully pulpit, if you will. There's only 50 attorneys general in the state, or in the nation. And so I have an opportunity to use this position to engage on quite a number of fronts.
Mm-hmm. So when you think about, you know, when we think about situations like that, you know, whether it be natural disaster, whether it be tornadoes, things like that, how do people go about, you know, getting those things resolved? Because it's like, okay, yeah, if I had a natural disaster or something happened in my community, heaven forbid we don't live close to water like New Orleans, but if something happens like that, what's the process?
Well, one of the things that we've tried to do, and we started this when I took over in 2017, we started a mobile unit. Okay. And our mobile unit sends a team out into the field of some of my staff members, and there's times when I've gone along. So if there's an event or disaster or some type of circumstance where we suspect that our services will come into play, we try to send that unit in there to let people know. In these types of times, you need to be aware that there are those who will prey on your misfortune. We do the same thing around tax time. Every year around tax time, you hear stories of people who've had their tax returns already claimed because someone has stolen their identity, turned in the tax return. So we try to alert people to the potential for those types of problems, and then we can provide services to them in terms of how to address their credit issues or how to try to reclaim their identities, things of that nature. So many things on the consumer front that we try to be helpful with that people don't really recognize until they get into a jam. And then usually there's some source or resource that says you can contact the Attorney General and see if they can help.
Sure. So when I think about, you know, even when you said privacy and you know, there was a big explosion with Facebook. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think now more and more you're seeing so many more entities that are, I think I just saw where Amazon is now having a thing where they can go in your car and deliver your package. Mm-hmm. And I think we're getting to a stage where we're having to be more open, or not having to be, but making the decision to be more open with the things that we deem private. How does that work in your office when you start seeing things where new things are starting to happen and technology is moving so fast to where privacy is now becoming like the thing that's really on the line for consumers? Well,
actually, Greg, we're not even making the choice. The choice is being made for us.
Okay.
Technology is moving so quickly, and the aspects of what technological advances have provided us is really scary. So there's so much that others know about your movements, your buying patterns, your habits, things of that nature. Yes, there's sometimes when you can click something on a piece of paper or on a mobile device and say, I approve, sure. But there are ways that they're tracking and getting information from you anyway. And it's a little bit, it's a little disconcerting because no matter what you do in government, government will never be in a process of be able to compete with what goes on in the private sector. So while we in government try to provide protections and ways to maintain your identity, maintain your privacy, there are a myriad of ways and things being done in the private sector where technology is flying through. It's very difficult to keep up. So we try to provide cautionary tales to consumers and the public on little things that they can do to help protect themselves. And so people can go to the Attorney General's website, and there's frequently asked questions and things of that nature, not just in Indiana, but all over the country, to try to help people with those types of issues.
Yeah, because, there are so many, like, say there's an app. It always asks you, are you okay with it? And it's like you click yes, but really there's always something in my head like, I don't think I want to do that.
No, well, there's times when I'll do something, and I'm not the most proficient person in technology, but I'll see something come along and it will say, if you do this, then that.
Yeah.
And so I'll back off and say, I didn't want to see that. I didn't want to read that article. I didn't want to go there because I don't want to give in to that, because you wonder what else comes along with it. And I think you have to be wary of that, of what else comes along with it, in order to provide as much security for yourself and your family as well. And the real troubling aspect is what it's doing with the millennials, the kids who have grown up with this. Guys like you and I, this technology is still sort of new and sort of a wonderment.
Yeah.
But for our kids who've known nothing but this, try telling them to be cautious with what they do on Facebook, what they do. Try letting them know, you're going to pay for this one day down the road on an interview when somebody looks up and says, oh, he did what?
Yep.
And what they thought was cute and funny and a hoot, and it might have been in that circle, might not be so funny when you're trying to get a job interview and someone looks back onto this thing you did online.
Right.
Those are the things that are somewhat troubling, trying to get that into the minds of youngsters as to what they can do to keep themselves on the straight and narrow.
I tell kids this all the time. I work in a school. But I tell kids all the time, I say, we really didn't have a lot of records of, it was like they took a picture with a Polaroid.
Yes.
You could put it in a book. Somebody used to have to open a book and say, remember this? Yeah. I said, man, you guys are having a permanent record that you're creating every single day.
We kept photo albums,
Yeah.
or we kept newspaper clips. If my name appeared in the newspaper when I was a kid, that was a big deal. You got the scissors, you cut it out, you glued it in a thing. Now, names in the paper, you don't need the paper anymore because it's online. It's there forever. Completely different world.
Absolutely. So what we're going to take a really quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation. You're watching the Expo Show. We'll be right back.
Saturday, July 21st, get ready for the IBE Music Heritage Festival #2, starring Maze featuring Frankie Beverly, along with Blackstreet featuring Teddy Riley and Dave Hollister, and also starring Brandy. Music Heritage Festival #2 at Bankers Life Fieldhouse, July 21st. Maze featuring Frankie Beverly, Blackstreet featuring Teddy Riley and Dave Hollister, and Brandy. Tickets on sale at all Ticketmaster outlets, the Indiana Black Expo box office, or at IndianaBlackExpo.com.
When I think about my son, I think about his big heart, how kind he was, just being there for everybody. Look, I am your brother. We need to stop the conflict with all this violence. Let's come together as a people. If you know something, just tell somebody. Our lives do matter.
And welcome back to the Expo Show. I'm your host, Greg Merriweather. We are here with Attorney General Curtis Hill. And, we were just kind of talking off air on, just the human side of people. And I just want you to, just tell the people, who is Curtis Hill? Who is he?
Well, I'm a lifelong Hoosier. I've been married for 24 years. I've got 5 children from the ages of 23 to 16, which I'm like any other fella. My responsibility is to take care of my family. I've chosen another responsibility to do what I can to take care of the community as best I can. Like to enjoy fun times with my friends. I got some buddies who we play a regular poker game since we've been 14 years old.
Wow!
And so every 2 or 3 months we get together and have pizza and play, and just be ourselves.
Yeah.
which I think is important for people to recognize, is that folks like me who have elected office and sometimes seem to be untouchable or unreachable are really regular folks with regular issues and just one of the crowd.
What do your children say about having Curtis Hill as their father? I can only imagine. I'm like, man, are you top cop to your kids?
Well, I mean, you know, they behave.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they've always experienced me in public life. I became prosecuting attorney in Elkhart, which is a very important role, and in a community, everybody knows it. Back in 2003, my oldest child was under 10. All my kids were small at the time, so they have always lived with me in an environment where I have some type of community authority or some type of responsibility. So they see it as ordinary. It's not a big deal to them. They came down for the inauguration last year and really went through the election process where I was on the road quite a lot and tried to not miss too much, but I missed a few things. They knew it was going to be a bit of a transition, and I think when they came to the inauguration and they saw the numbers and the people, they were getting a feel for the shift in the enormity of moving from a county position to a statewide position and what goes along with that. But they've handled it very well. I mean, I'm just their father.
Yeah.
And I get humbled when I go home. I still take the trash out, and I'm still chasing around and getting yelled at for needing lunch money and this and that.
Yes, sir.
The usual things.
So, one of the things that I know about you is man, you had the most votes anybody's ever gotten.
Yeah.
That's pretty big, man.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. When you look and it's like stamped, your name's in the record book.
Yeah, and let's emphasize, anybody.
Yeah.
Ever.
Ever.
Yeah, I got to say that because if it's true, it's not bragging. But
Right. It's true.
Like any record, at some point that would be broken. But it's really gratifying, and I like to believe it's because we did a great deal of hard work to get there. Worked very hard in the convention process. Worked very hard in the general election process. Got around the state. I like to believe it has a lot to do with the kind of message that I was trying to resonate. I like to believe that it was a result of running a positive campaign in the general election. I had folks around me who certainly suggested that, well, you need to do a contrast ad. And I wouldn't go for it. Okay. And so at a point in time in October when everybody else's ads had a bit of a bite to it, or most had a bit of a bite to it, and people were getting tired of that, my ads were popping around and they were talking about what I can do for Indiana. And I believe firmly that you need to be in a position when you're running for office to be able to say what you can do versus what the other guy doesn't do. And if you can't say a great deal about what you can do, then perhaps you shouldn't be running. And so that positive message, I like to believe, had a lot to do with my success in the numbers that we posted. But it was a very gratifying, very pleasing, and also very humbling.
Yeah. So Curtis Hill just gave us some information since, got primaries and all that kind of stuff. He just gave you some information on how to run for office. So, what are, now that you're in this position, what was, when you walked in, what was the adjustment like? What was the thing that you was like, man, this might be a little tough? Well,
given my years of experience as a prosecutor and having some exposure to the state process, I can't say that there was a great deal that I was surprised about. One of the things that I can share with you as an observation, it's very clear that the Indianapolis State House environment does not lend itself well to people coming from outside that environment. From a campaigning standpoint, it's very difficult to campaign for a state office from the extreme north or the extreme south. And there wasn't exactly anybody who was knocking on my door asking me to come. So it was a very lonely process in terms of getting down here. The good news is I owe nobody anything. We worked on it was hard work, so we come down and we do our own thing. But you find that many people have an expectation of, oh, this is the way it works. And so they expect you to just fit into that role, whether it's in Indianapolis or whether it's in Washington. I don't fit that mold. That may be the way it works, but I'm going to do what I think is appropriate from my standpoint. So we come in and we do what we think is the correct or right thing to do. That's a little different than what I've seen. But I'm okay with that because a lot of what I've seen is not the way that I would want to operate. And if we're going to make progress as a state, if we're going to make progress as a nation, we have to be in a position to recognize that we're much more than our ideological boundaries. I can stand here and say I'm a conservative and this is what I believe, and I can spend so much time pounding the table telling you what I believe. I'm not using any of that time to listen to what you believe. And if I'm not listening to you, what gives me the right to think that you're listening back?
Right.
And what happens is exactly what happens today. You have sides that are polarized, you have major events that are not being addressed, and we go deeper and deeper and deeper into a divide that really is no good for our country. I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. And my side is just as bad as the other side. So I'm not saying, oh, it's the other guys. In fact, I get upset because I have a higher expectation for the people on my side. So when I see my side, I mean, look at it this way. My side has complete control in Washington, D.C., Republican House, Republican Senate, and Republican Congress. And when things don't go the way that they want to go, they want to blame the Democrats. I'm sorry. We have control, we have power, so there's something that we need to do to accept responsibility. I would feel the same way if the Democrats are in power. So part of having power is the ability to know how to use it and how to share it in order to facilitate moving in a positive direction.
That's good, man. So when I think about this, how is it, end of the day, you've had a challenging, do you take stuff home? Like, at the end of the day, it's like, I know you do a lot of stuff, so what does it look like, man? I mean, it seems like you might have some times where it's like, ugh.
Well, I do take some things home. I mean, I'm down here most of the week and usually on the road as well. But I often have meetings and other events in the evening. But I will take things home in terms of reviewing cases that we have to sign off on, or I have to review and make sure. I mean, I'm at the top of the food chain, so there's lots of things and processes that are in place that we have people who can do some certain sign-offs, but there are other key things that require me. So there are some things of that nature. I try to spend a little time in the morning working out to keep physical. I mean, I've been very fortunate to have good health, and I want to keep it that way, and I think it takes work to do that. But there's, in the evenings, it's really trying to catch up on what's coming up the next day and having enough energy to go out and hit it. I'm not a young man anymore.
I understand. So we're gonna take a really quick break. We're gonna come back, man. Curtis Hill just made me feel like I need to start working out more, but nevertheless, we're gonna take a quick break and we'll be right back. You're watching the Expo Show.
Saturday, July 21st, get ready for the IBE Music Heritage Festival #2, starring Maze featuring Frankie Beverly, along with Blackstreet featuring Teddy Riley and Dave Hollister, and also starring Brandy. Music Heritage Festival #2 at Bankers Life Fieldhouse, July 21st. Maze featuring Frankie Beverly, Blackstreet featuring Teddy Riley and Dave Hollister, and Brandy. Tickets on sale at all Ticketmaster outlets, the Indiana Black Expo box office, or at IndianaBlackExpo.com.
When I think about my son, I think about his big heart, how kind he was, just being there for everybody. Look, I am your brother. We need to stop the conflict with all this violence. Let's come together as a people. If you know something, just tell somebody. Our lives do matter.
Welcome back to the Expo Show. We are here with my guest, Attorney General Curtis Hill. Man, I'm excited, man, because you just said some phenomenal things that really make me feel good. Because I think that with politics, we get concerned at times when it's like, well, everything is always right, no matter what side of the fence I'm on. A lot of people don't look and say, we might have messed up there. So when with that being said, do you have days like that where you're just like, man, was that the right decision?
Sure.
How does that go? Do you go back and fix it, or do you say, okay, what do we do?
Well, if we can. I mean, I'm a firm believer that we all make mistakes. As a prosecuting attorney, I learned it at an early age. That was a great job because I had to make decisions based on evidence on a very regular basis, very fast pace. And so I used to train my deputy prosecutors that look, you do the job, you make a decision based on what you believe is right, based upon the information you have.
Right.
If later on you're proven to have been incorrect, as long as you made it at the time based on what you had, I'm fine with you.
Sure.
Because we have to make decisions. And I think that's important. We all are fallible. We all make mistakes. There's no perfect way of doing things, so we do the best we can to be consistent, to be fair, to acknowledge when we don't have something quite right. But you have to keep moving forward, and you have to have the courage to make those decisions. And when you're in a position that I'm in, whether it's a prosecuting attorney, whether it's attorney general, people rely on the decisions that I make.
Right.
So I try to make decisions that I think are right, and I make decisions that I believe are justifiable. And that doesn't mean that everybody will agree, but what I have found is if you have a solid rationale for what you do, and you're able to articulate that, most people will give you that much.
Sure.
And what doesn't work is if you just state your position and there's no rationale, there's no rhyme or reason, it's just because and that's all there is to it.
Right.
Well, that's where people get turned off. I get turned off by that, and that's how I operate. I mean, it's the golden rule. How would I want people to operate with me? That's how I want to operate with them.
I'm with that. What are in your day today, what you do as Attorney General, what are some of the challenges? What are your challenges in that job every single day? What are you challenged with on a regular basis?
Well, we're challenged, in terms of our environment around us. People talk about Washington, but the state operates this way, and even my own office. There's a bureaucracy. So I can have great ideas of what I want to accomplish, but we have 400 people in our office, and there are systems that have been in place since Hector was a pup that you sometimes have to massage out to be able to get to what you want to get accomplished, and so that can be frustrating. It can be frustrating with the state apparatus, and it can be frustrating at Washington. What I like to do is try to find really solutions to bigger problems, bigger areas. I've been very concerned about violence and its impact on the various communities. I'm very concerned about the relationship that law enforcement has with the community and what that's doing to the communities, but also what it's doing to law enforcement. The hiring pools across the entire state and also in the country are way down in law enforcement circles, and that's a bad thing, because what's happening is so many people who would ordinarily want to be law enforcement no longer want to, because there's a genuine feeling, whether it's real or not, but there's certainly a perception that people are not pleased with law enforcement, and so you're seeing less and less people get involved. Here's what happens. The smaller the hiring pool, the less quality of candidates. The less quality of candidates, the more problems that you're going to have from a law enforcement perspective in terms of who you're putting out on the street.
Right.
So it becomes a circular thing. We really want to have as many candidates as possible so that we can create standards that are exceedingly high, so that we can address problems in the community appropriately. So those are issues that I think we have to hit on dead on, because if we don't speak truthfully about those types of issues, we lose. I'm very concerned about the amount of violence in the black community, particularly black on black violence with youth violence, and doing what I can to try to bring some practical realism to those issues so that we can solve problems and not just complain that people are dying. We need to understand why people are dying. We understand why people are engaging in offenses. Why do people turn to substance abuse or lives of crime? What is it that's missing in that life that creates that dynamic where someone goes on and moves into there? I get concerned because we sometimes talk about reforming our criminal justice system by reducing sentences so that we don't put as many people in prison. That doesn't address the issue that the person committed the conduct that we want to discourage.
Right.
I would much prefer that we identify what it is that creates that dynamic in that person, that cold-heartedness, that antisocial behavior, and what can we do to correct that? Because we don't have to lock everybody up, but we certainly have to hold everyone accountable for their behavior and their actions. And so those are things that I think through on a regular basis and try to communicate that in a way that moves us to a point where we can resolve and save people as opposed to just engaging in the rhetoric.
So when you hit on an area that is near and dear to me with the entire violence thing, because I do think that there's a front end thing. There's something on the front end that takes you there. And being a person who has seen friends, family go that route, I'm like, something clicked, something happened. And so I'm thrilled to hear you say that. How do you go about it? Is there an avenue of certain, how do people like myself have those conversations? Because I think that there are people who people talk to, who you may talk to, but then there are others who have a voice, who are like, maybe it's not being heard. Maybe there's other areas where people can say, hey, I've got a thought. Can that message get to you? And if so, how?
Well, we hope so. I mean, it's a little difficult when you're in a position. It's very difficult for everybody to get to me. But we do have communication through our website. We do have opportunities where I'm out in the public to be able to address issues. And it's important that I hear from people, and it's also important that people hear some of my views. From my standpoint, I've seen 12-year-old kids of all races, but particularly black kids, who may not have a father at home, may have a mother who's not engaged, but the kids are great. The kids are smart, they're able to learn, and then something happens. 6 years later, I'm looking at the high school graduation stage, and that kid's not there. And it's happening over and over and over again. And I figured out what's happening. What's happening is that 12-year-old kid is at a point where he or she needed to have somebody in their life that they didn't want to disappoint. When I look at my own upbringing, I had mother and father, but my father in particular, I didn't want to do anything to disappoint that man.
Right.
And I'm sure I did, but I certainly didn't want to. And that motivated me, that crafted who I was going to be. Imagine if I didn't have that.
Right.
If I didn't have that person that I didn't want to disappoint. And then what happens, and what happens so much in our community, is somebody comes into that kid's life and it's a bad influence, and they don't want to disappoint them.
That's real.
And then it takes off. And that's what's happening with these kids at the age of 12. I use that, it can be 10, it can be 11, but right around that age, the wheels go off the bus.
Absolutely. So we got a few seconds. What is it? Give us a word to the state of Indiana of something that you want to leave the people with today.
Courage. I think we need to have the courage to speak the truth about how we see the world and what we can all do to engage real problems with real solutions. That we get away from the expectations that we think we're under. I have to think this way because I belong to this group, or I have to say this because this is what people think I'm supposed to say, and clear all that up and become who we are as humans. We're thinking people. We have minds. We can look it up. We can think it through and use our brains and our collective willpower and all the gifts we've been given by God to move forward and solve problems. It takes courage to be strong and courageous, as Joshua was told, and if we all work on that, we can actually turn this ship around.
Absolutely. I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Greg.
Absolutely. You've heard it here, Attorney General Curtis Hill. I'm appreciative of having him here. So if you got any issues, make sure we'll put the website out here. So make sure you check on the website. If there's anything you think needs to go through his office, please do so. This has been the Expo Show. I'm your host, Greg Merriweather. We'll see you next week. Have a great one.